Dub Nation, I want to start tonight by being completely honest with you about how I'm feeling, because I think you deserve that, and the truth is, I'm a little shaken up, because I just watched Shams Charania say something on national television that I genuinely did not think I would hear in this stage of the Stephen Curry era, and I have spent the last hour pacing my living room trying to figure out if I'm getting ahead of myself, or if this is exactly as big as it feels. It feels enormous. I was watching the show, the desk was rolling through the usual off-season chatter, and then Shams gets handed the moment and he leans in, and the very first thing out of his mouth was that he had just gotten off the phone. Not sources say, not I'm hearing. He said he had been contacted directly, that someone connected to Jaylen Brown reached out to him, and he wanted to bring it to the audience right then and there. And the team that came out of his mouth next was the Golden State Warriors. I almost didn't believe my own ears, so I rewound it, and I'm gonna walk you through every piece of this, because if you are a Warriors fan, this is the kind of night you remember. Hey, what's up everyone? Real quick before we get into everything, that like button is literally what determines if this reaches hundreds or thousands of fans. Takes 1 second, but makes a huge impact on the channel's growth. Just smash that like button right now. It's the easiest thing you can do, but honestly, the biggest way to support this content, every single like pushes this further, so hit it now. But before I give you the meat of it, I have to set the table, because the context is what makes this so heavy, and I'm not gonna pretend everything is sunshine, because you're smarter than that, and you've watched this season same as me. We did not make the playoffs, let's just say it plainly. The season ended in the play-in and a loss to the Phoenix Suns, and it was the kind of ending that forces a hard look in the mirror. Stephen Curry is entering his 18th season. 18, the greatest shooter who has ever lived, 4 championships, and the cold reality that every Warriors fan carries around in their chest, whether they admit it or not, is that the number of legitimate title windows left is not large, and it might be one. Jimmy Butler is here on a massive contract brought in to chase exactly this. Draymond Green is here, and the word is he's planning to decline his option and re-sign so the front office can stay flexible. The core is built to win now. The problem all season was the same problem it's been. Not enough top-end talent next to Curry, not enough shot creation when he sits or when he gets swarmed, and a roster that outside of the big three is young and unproven. That is the team. That is the situation Shams Charania was speaking into. Hold on to it. So here is what he said, and I want you to feel the weight of the phrasing, because Shams chooses his words like a surgeon. He said he received a call from a member of Jaylen Brown's camp. His representation, his business team, the people who speak for him and don't say anything by accident. And the message that was relayed to Shams, the reason they picked up the phone and called the most connected reporter in the sport, was this: that the Golden State Warriors have become a situation Jaylen Brown's side is paying very, very close attention to, and that the interest is mutual and growing. Shams said the people around Brown wanted it known that Golden State is on the radar, and that there is a real belief on Brown's side that pairing with Stephen Curry on a roster built to win immediately with a front office that has the assets to make it happen is one of the most appealing landing spots available to him this entire summer. Read that back. The players' camp called a reporter to plant the flag. You do not do that by accident. That is a message, and the message was aimed straight at the Bay, and I already hear the skeptics warming up, so let me get in front of it because I respect you too much to just feed you hope. The first thing the doubters say is, the players' camp leaks stuff all the time to create leverage. This is just Brown's people trying to drum up a market. And you know what? That's a fair point, and it might even be partly true. But here's what you have to understand about why that actually helps the Warriors instead of hurting them. When a player's camp wants to manufacture leverage, they leak to create a bidding war among many teams. That is not what happened here. Shams specifically named Golden State and specifically described the interest as mutual. When a camp gets that targeted, that specific, naming one destination as a place their guy genuinely wants to be, that's not leverage building, that's a signal. That's a player telling the world where he wants to go in the only language the NBA allows, which is through a trusted reporter. So even if you want to be cynical and call it a leak, you have to admit it's a leak pointed directly at Chase Center, and that should make the hair on your arms stand up. Now let's talk about why Jaylen Brown is even available, because this whole thing collapses if Boston isn't actually moving him, and I'm here to tell you they are absolutely positioned to. The Celtics, the team Brown won a championship with, the team where he was finals MVP, just got knocked out in the first round. Game 7, at home, losing to Philadelphia in their own building. And the bigger story is the money. Boston is staring down a luxury tax bill so monstrous it's been described in numbers approaching $250 million in penalties. And a team in that position does not get to keep everybody. They've already started shedding salary. They're trying to retool around Jason Tatum coming back from a torn Achilles. So Jaylen Brown, a 29-year-old in his prime making max money, is the obvious, the logical, the almost unavoidable piece that has to be put on the table. The whole league knows it. He's been linked to Atlanta, to New Orleans, to Houston, to Portland. He even, and you cannot make this up, listed his Boston penthouse for sale, which is the most clear as day, I'm getting out of here signal a professional athlete can send without saying a word. So the player is available, the player is in his prime, and the player's own camp is calling reporters about the Warriors. Connect the dots, Dub Nation. They connect themselves, and the fit. Oh, the fit. Let me paint it for you. Jaylen Brown is 29 years old. He is a two-way wing, which is the single most valuable archetype in modern basketball. He can defend the other team's best perimeter scorer, the exact job that has been wearing this roster thin for years. And he can go get you 25 points in a playoff game when the offense bogs down. Do you understand what that does next to Stephen Curry? For Curry's entire career, the Holy Grail has been giving him a self-sufficient scoring wing who can carry the load when teams chase him off the three-point line and trap him into giving up the ball. Imagine Curry bending the entire defense, and the relief valve, the guy on the other end of that pass, is a finals MVP who can rise up and bury you. Imagine Jimmy Butler taking the second toughest defensive assignment while Brown takes the first. Imagine the closing lineup. Curry, Butler, Brown, Draymond. That is a championship caliber group of names, and that is not a fantasy I invented. That is a roster the Warriors have the realistic pieces to construct. Because here's the part that turns this from a wish into a workable plan, and this is where the front office, Mike Dunleavy's group, comes in. The Warriors have the matching salary and the assets to actually do this. We are talking about a package that could be built around young players the Celtics would want in a retool. Players like Brandon Podziemski and Moses Moody, the kind of cost-controlled talent on cheaper deals that a tax-strapped Boston team is desperate for. Plus Jonathan Kuminga as a high-upside young piece, plus draft picks. That is exactly the shape of deal a rebuilding around Tatum Celtics team is looking for. Young, cheap, controllable bodies and future capital. In exchange for an expensive star, they have to move for financial reasons anyway. It fits both sides. The Warriors get their final piece superstar for the Curry window. Boston gets younger, cheaper, and richer in picks. That symmetry is why this is real. That symmetry is why a reporter as careful as Shams Charania would put it on air. Now I promised you the other side, and the other side, predictably, was Stephen A. Smith, who damn near came through my television screen on the next segment. Stephen A. was beside himself. He said the Golden State Warriors have to stop his words, stop pretending they can keep duct taping superstars onto a roster led by a 38-year-old Stephen Curry and a Jimmy Butler who is no spring chicken himself, and expect to outrun the youth and athleticism of the Western Conference. He said you watched what happened, they didn't even make the playoffs, they lost in the play-in, and the answer to being too old and too thin is somehow to trade away your young legs, your Podziemski, your Moody, your Kuminga, the only future you have left, for another 30-something bound veteran timeline. He said it makes no sense that Golden State would be mortgaging the only youth on the roster to win a race they're already too slow to win, and he said it with his whole chest. And I'll tell you what, Dub Nation, that take is not stupid, and I won't pretend it is. But it's built on a premise I flatly reject, and here's my answer. Stephen A. is talking about Jaylen Brown like he's another aging veteran. He is 29 years old. That is not the end of a timeline. That is the prime of one. If you trade young, unproven players for a 29-year-old Finals MVP, you are not getting older, you are getting better, and you are staying in a perfectly reasonable age range to win for the next several years even after Curry. Brown is the bridge. He is the guy you win with now, and the guy who's still standing when the torch gets passed. And the second thing, Stephen A., always ignores when he does this bit about the Warriors being too old is that this franchise has done exactly this before. They have taken big swings, they have been counted out, they have been called washed, and they have raised banners while the doubters were still talking. This isn't a front office that's afraid of the moment. This is a front office that has the rings to prove the moment doesn't scare them. And I want to spend a real minute on the cost, because I'm not gonna skip over the painful part the way the hype channels do. And the painful part has a name, and the name is Jonathan Kuminga. If this deal is built the way the framework suggests, you are very likely sending out your most physically gifted young player, the high upside athletic forward this fan base has been arguing about for years, the guy a lot of you see as the bridge to the post-Curry future. And I'm not going to pretend that's nothing. That's real. Letting go of that kind of athletic ceiling, plus a Brandon Podziemski who plays his heart out, plus a Moses Moody who has turned himself into a legitimate rotation wing, plus draft picks is a steep, steep price. But here's the question you have to ask yourself, Dub Nation, and you have to answer it honestly. How many more legitimate cracks at a championship does Stephen Curry have left? 2? 1? And when the clock on the greatest shooter who ever lived is that close to running out, do you hoard upside and unproven youth, or do you cash every chip you have into a 29-year-old proven champion who can help you win right now? There is no wrong feeling here, but there is a clear answer if your priority is winning a title before Curry walks away, and that answer is you make the call. You make the hard, painful, irreversible call, because you do not get these years back. And let me give you the vision, because once you see the closing lineup, the price stops looking so scary. Picture the final 5 minutes of a playoff game. Stephen Curry running off 1,000 screens, dragging 2 defenders with him everywhere he goes, warping the entire floor with gravity no other human in history has had. Jimmy Butler in the corner, the postseason assassin, waiting to go to work in the mid-range the second the defense overcommits to Curry. Draymond Green orchestrating, screening, defending 5 positions, the brain of the whole thing. And now, on the wing, instead of a young player you're praying makes the right read, you've got Jaylen Brown, a finals MVP, a man who has already stood in that exact moment and delivered a championship. When Curry gets trapped and gives it up, the ball finds Brown, and Brown doesn't hesitate, he rises and buries it or attacks the closeout and gets to the rim. That is the answer to the problem that has haunted this team in the playoffs for years. What happens when they take the ball out of Curry's hands? With Brown, the answer is they get punished. That's the lineup, that's the dream, and it's a realistic one. And here's why half measures won't cut it. Here's why I think the front office is willing to even consider something this drastic. The Western Conference is a shark tank right now. Oklahoma City is young and terrifying and built to dominate for years. The conference is loaded top to bottom, and the Warriors did not even make the playoffs this year. You cannot crawl out of the play-in and into a championship by adding role players around the edges. The gap between where this team is and where it needs to be is a star-sized gap, and you only close a star-sized gap with a star. Jaylen Brown is that star. He is the exact size and shape of the hole in this roster, so when Stephen A screams that they shouldn't gut the youth, I'd ask him back. What is the youth for, if not to be traded for the final piece that wins Stephen Curry one last ring? Prospects you never cash in are just trivia. This front office has never been afraid to cash them in, and I don't think they're afraid now. And there's a culture piece to this that I think gets overlooked, and it matters more in Golden State than almost anywhere else in the league. This is a franchise that has, for over a decade, been defined by an identity, by selflessness, by ball movement, by stars who sacrifice for each other, by a locker room that polices itself with Draymond Green as the enforcer and Stephen Curry as the quiet North Star. Not every great player fits into that. But Jaylen Brown is a serious, cerebral, driven competitor who has talked openly his whole career about legacy and about proving people wrong, and that is exactly the kind of edge that thrives in that room. Curry's gravity doesn't just bend defenses, it bends egos, because nobody who plays next to that man wants to be the reason the magic stops. I think Brown walks into that environment and elevates, because the structure around him is already built by champions. And don't underestimate Curry himself as a recruiter, because when the greatest shooter alive picks up the phone and tells you to come chase a ring with him, that is a pull very few players in this sport can resist. So where does that leave us? And why am I so worked up over a single phone call relayed on a TV show? Because of the one thing I saved, the detail Shams dropped right at the very end of the segment that turned my stomach over. After he laid out the interest, after he explained the fit, Shams paused and he added that based on what was communicated to him, Jaylen Brown's side made it clear that this is not just about money or about being moved somewhere by Boston against his will. He said the message was that Brown wants to compete for a championship, that he is hungry to prove the first title was no accident, and that the chance to do it next to Stephen Curry chasing a ring in that specific Warriors environment is something he finds genuinely meaningful. In other words, this isn't a star being dumped, this is a star raising his hand. And when a player of Jaylen Brown's caliber raises his hand for your team through his own camp on the record with the most trusted reporter in the business, you do not treat that as background noise. You treat it as the start of something. I'm not telling you it's done. I'm not telling you to print a jersey tonight. But I am telling you that the most important currency in any NBA trade is a star who actually wants to be there. And tonight, Dub Nation, that star said your team's name out loud, clear as day, for the whole basketball world to hear. Keep your eyes open this summer, because this is the kind of phone call that history turns on, and we may have just heard it ring.